Today, we're diving into the invisible architecture of our future. We're talking about everything from stronger, lighter airplanes to batteries that last way, way longer. And the key to all of it? It's something called computational material science, which is basically how we design the materials of tomorrow, not in a lab coat, but inside a computer.
So, this is the big question, right? How do we actually build these incredible materials? I mean, it's not like we can just find them lying around anymore. The future is all about designing them from the ground up, literally atom by atom.
And this really gets to the heart of the problem. On the one hand, the goal is pretty clear. We want to know exactly how making a material a certain way affects its internal structure, and how that structure determines how it'll perform in the real world. Simple enough. But the challenge is huge. Our physical tools, like even the best microscopes, just can't see what's happening at the atomic level, especially when it's happening in trillionths of a second. And that's where all the important stuff happens.
So yeah, this is what we call the material design challenge. There's this massive gap between what we need to know and what our own eyes, or even our best instruments, can actually see. I mean, think about what scientists are trying to track. Things like dislocations. You can picture them as tiny, moving glitches in a perfect crystal structure that actually determine its strength. Or something like a phase transformation, which is kind of like water turning to ice, but it's happening inside a solid chunk of metal. These events are either way too fast or way too slow for us to really observe properly, which leaves this huge blind spot in our understanding.
Okay, so this is where things get really cool. To solve a problem we couldn't physically see, we needed a whole new kind of laboratory, a virtual one. And this is the world of computational material science.
So what is it exactly? Well, computational material science is this powerful mashup of different fields. You take the basic laws of physics, translate them into the language of math, and then you use seriously powerful computers to simulate how a material is going to act. It's like building a perfect digital twin of a material, where you can poke it, prod it, and test it without any limits. And this virtual lab, it basically gives us superpowers. We can finally see those hidden atomic dances. We can test out wild theories that would be impossible or way too dangerous to try in a real lab. We can see what happens when you put a material under insane pressure or heat, without blowing anything up. And the biggest deal of all, we can go from just discovering materials to actually designing them from scratch. But how in the world does this actually work? Well, the secret is a concept called multi-scale modeling, or as I like to think of it, connecting the scales.
Here's the key thing to get. A material isn't just one thing. It's a whole hierarchy of things happening at different sizes. The physics that explains how two atoms stick together is totally different from the physics that explains how an entire airplane wing bends. To get the whole picture, you have to simulate all of those different scales.
Now, this table might look a little intimidating, but don't worry about all the technical names. The main idea is that it's like different zoom levels. We start at the very bottom, at the electronic level, simulating how the basic bonds form. The answers from that simulation get passed up to the next level, the atomic scale, where we see how millions of atoms behave together. And that info gets passed up again and again, all the way until we can predict how a finished, full-size part is going to perform. It's like a relay race of information, connecting the tiniest nanoworld to the huge macro world. And pretty much every single simulation, no matter what it's for, follows the same basic path. First, you set up the problem with math. Second, you chop up those complex equations into millions of tiny, simple pieces the computer can actually solve. Third, the computer does its thing and crunches all those numbers. And finally, you do post-processing, which is the fun part where you turn all that raw data into these amazing visualizations that actually tell you something useful.
Now, you might be thinking that these supercomputers are making old-school lab experiments obsolete, but that couldn't be further from the truth. What's really happening is that they're forming this incredibly powerful partnership. You can see this perfect feedback loop right here. The real-world experiments, they provide the ground truth. They give us the hard data that we use to make sure our computer models are accurate, and not just making stuff up. Then, the simulations give us the why. They explain what we're seeing in the lab and let us run 1,000 what-if scenarios, which makes our next physical experiment that much smarter and more focused. And we're talking about real high-tech experiments here, things like electron microscopes and machines that stretch and pull materials apart. The data from those tests gets fed directly into the simulations. This is what makes sure our virtual lab isn't just science fiction. It's that digital twin perfectly calibrated to match the real world. So, now that we have this incredible tag team of real and virtual science, what are we actually building with it? Let's take a look at how we're simulating a better future right now. Take something like 3D printing with metal. It's this super delicate dance where a laser melts tiny bits of metal powder. Well, simulations can predict exactly how that tiny pool of molten metal is going to behave, moment by moment. That means we can stop tiny defects from ever forming, and that means we can print incredibly strong and reliable parts for things like jet engines and custom medical implants.
It's also completely changing old-school techniques like forging, blacksmith stuff. It used to be a lot of trial and error, but now, with simulations, we can predict exactly where stress is going to build up and how the inside of the metal is changing. The result? Much stronger and lighter parts for cars, planes, you name it.
We can even zoom way in to the level of the individual crystals inside a metal. These models show us how each tiny little grain bends and deforms. Think about wood. It's way stronger if you go with the grain, right? It's the same idea. By simulating this, we can design metal parts to be strongest exactly where they need that strength, making them way more durable.
So here's the bottom line. We are shifting from an age where we just discovered materials to a new age where we design them. This virtual laboratory gives us the tools to build things with properties we could only dream of before. And that leaves us with one last, really exciting question. If we can digitally design pretty much any material we can imagine, what are we going to build next?